Welcome to Transformation. By working together, we can change the world. I'm your host, Diane J. Shaver. The guests on Transformation are people who are doing things that are changing our world in a really positive way. They vary widely, and today's guest is an example of that. But each of them is making a better, more caring world for everyone. I came across our guest today sort of through the back door, if you will. I didn't know who he was or what he had accomplished. At that time in my life, I felt totally alone, and I found something called Godwinkers, thanks to a friend, Maria, and I'm always grateful to her for that. Godwinkers is a group of wonderful people who, when you post the problem that you have or what's troubling you, they will pray for you, they will give you advice, they will listen to you, they will support you. And one woman, I will never forget this, one woman named Derry offered me a place in her home in Long Island. I'm in Charleston. And that had no effect on her. It's like wherever it was, I was welcome. And I will never forget that. That changed my life. It made me understand I am not alone, no matter what I'm going through or whatever is going on. And that's an important message. And that came from SQuire. But anyway, we'll go on. And I want to include his beautiful, sweet wife, Louise DuArt, in this too. She was a part of that for me. So I'm going to introduce SQuire Rushnell to you. And you may know him as a popular speaker and the New York Times bestselling author who introduced the term Godwink into the language and actually into dictionaries, which I love. So what it means is it's not a coincidence, but an astonishing experience from divine origin. And SQuire has more than 1.5 million books in print. And think about that, 1.5 million books. That's a lot of books. And his monthly Godwinks on NBC Today Show is one of the most streamed. His 11th book, Godwink Christmas Stories, is co-authored with his wife, his wonderful wife, Louise DuArt. And they're also authors and executive producers for A Godwink Christmas. You probably all saw that, one of the highest rated films of the year on Hallmark's Movies and Mysteries channel. I love that channel. It has the best stuff. So as a veteran of ABC television network, SQuire led Good Morning America to #1 and was a father of the acclaimed Schoolhouse Rock. Remember that? I remember that series. And then ABC after-school specials. Programs under his direction captured more than 75, think about that, Emmy Awards. That's a lot. SQuire's Facebook page is a daily Godwink gathering where over 277,000 people share their extraordinary stories. It's my very great privilege and honor to introduce our guest on Holistic Transformation today, SQuire Rushnell. Welcome, SQuire. And this is a real welcome from my heart. I want you to know.
Well, thank you. And I'm so glad that you had such a wonderful experience with the Godwinkers. My wonderful wife, Louise, as you said, is the one who primarily is the shepherd on that site. And I generally manage the other site. And we just said this morning in our morning prayer time together, we need to do more of, you need to come over and do more on the Godwink public page, and I need to show up once in a while on the Godwinker page, because we are a couple that hates to be apart.
Really? I love that. Thank you for saying that. That's cool.
And this is one of those moments where we are apart. She has actually gone to the store.
And you let her?
I know it's a higher calling. It's called a sale at the Charleston Shoe Company. Now, you must be thinking about Charleston shoes in South Carolina.
Yeah.
But the Charleston Shoe Company is her favorite store on Martha's Vineyard, and there is a sale there today.
Oh, no.
Anyway, that was the higher call.
And that's your competition. We just want to tell you. So.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah.
But I heard that you met, well, first of all, let's define Godwink. What brought you to that term? Why did you feel that it was important to define it?
Well, I was always fascinated with coincidences.
Okay.
And I always felt that that was, it didn't really describe what it was that I thought was happening. Because coincidences seems like such a scientific kind of word. And where I was feeling that some of these experiences that I was calling coincidence really were grounded in a divine origin. And so anyway, I started getting fascinated with coincidences a long time ago. The first time was when I was hooked on American history, and I was reading American history books, and I read all by myself in a room that the two of the three guys that had the most to do with the Declaration of Independence, who were still alive in 1826, were Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, and that they both died on the same day.
I didn't know that. Holy
died on the 4th of July. The
That's just rubbing it in.
The 50th anniversary of the celebration of the 4th of July. And I said, wow. And I thought, that has got to be more than coincidence. Now, that was in the back of my mind about 10 years later, after I had spent several years running Good Morning America and standing in the back of the control room. And every time a reporter said, ironically today, I would prick up my ears to see if there was something in what they were going to tell me was like one of those coincidences that didn't seem like a coincidence.
Correct.
And one day I gave a talk at the little church that I attended, which was across the road from the country home of my hero, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, writer of The Power of Positive Thinking. And I actually got to meet Dr. Peale and his family, and they attended that church on occasion when he wasn't at the Marble Collegiate Church in New York. And I always felt that I was really kind of divinely aligned to be there. And one day they asked me if I'd be willing to give the pastor was going to be away a couple of weeks from then, and would I be willing to give the Sunday morning talk? I didn't say sermon because I didn't feel qualified because I'm not a pastor. So I said, yeah, I will do the talk. I would love to be able to speak from a pulpit. And anyway, I gave the talk. They invited me back subsequent times. And on my 5th return engagement, I talked about a topic that had always fascinated me. Now, believe me, I had 6 months to prepare for this talk. And this was the most important thing that I was doing, was to prepare the talk for this little church of maybe 100 people in a 150-seat church in a Grandma Moses painting, rolling hills outside and across the road from Dr. Peale's house. That was my focus, was doing that talk. Coincidence. Is it evidence of a grand plan? That was the name of my talk. And so I prepared, and the talk was the first weekend in January of the new year. And then I had to change my opening to the talk when it actually happening.
Why? What happened?
Well, what happened is that I said we had a tragic event that happened to us here on Quaker Hill. It was called Quaker Hill.
Okay.
We lost our dear friend, Dr. Peale.
Oh,
he went to be with God in heaven on New Year, on Christmas Eve.
Wow.
And I said, it was the President of the United States who said, what a coincidence that Dr. Peale, who gave his life to celebrating the birth of Christ and the life of Christ, that he would die on the very eve that we would celebrate that birth. And then I said, was that coincidence? I wonder. And I told story after story in my talk. And they were all about these amazing so-called coincidences that I didn't feel should be called coincidence. And honestly, Diane, I was looking at a congregation of adults who were as excited in their facial expressions as children hearing the story of the night before Christmas. And I said, I believe that this is evidence of a grand plan. What do I know? I'm a TV guy. I brought you Schoolhouse Rock. I brought you the ABC After School. I ran Good Morning America. What do I know? But I believe there is something more to that. So they became my encouragers to start writing a book. And I started realizing that all those, when I went online and I Googled in coincidence, and I got a whole bunch of stories, that none of them belonged in the book. And they never ended up in that first book called When God Winks. And Godwink then became a word. And it was just before I actually went to press with this book.
Yeah.
My literary agent, a grande dame of the literary art world, and she said, you have to tell the reader what a coincidence means.
Mm.
I don't know what a coincidence means. I mean, I'm like the chicken soup for the soul guy. You just put the stories out there and people will make of them what they will. And she said, no. If you want to write a book that makes a difference, you have to share with your reader what a coincidence means.
You have to name it.
I have to name it. And so for 6 months, my wife, Louise, and I, we were both now living on Martha's Vineyard, and we spent that 6 months talking to each other, praying with each other, talking with people at dinner. What is a coincidence? What is a coincidence? What is a coincidence? And we came to the conclusion it had something to do with faith. And then it began to evolve. And then one day, like an idea comes into your head. You don't know where it comes from, but it comes from the creative source of all creativity.
Einstein talked about that.
Yes, absolutely. And that idea came into my mind, Godwink. And I thought, wow, that's a friendly word. That's Godsend, Godspeed, Godwink. And I went back to my manuscript, and I did that thing where you can change all the words.
Yeah.
I put
Change.
Replace it with Godwink. And at that time, I did it as a lowercase g, and because I really wanted to be on the fence. You know, I want to be right there. I want to reach the secular world, but I don't want to lose the faith. And so Godwink was born. And at that point, it really had nothing more than a definition of a word that replaces or fills the vacancy in the language for a coincidence that you don't believe is a coincidence.
Yeah.
But subsequent to that, I have expanded that definition for dictionaries. A coincidence that comes from, that seems like a coincidence, but it's an action or an experience that comes from divine origin. And that the other meaning for that in the dictionaries is one that the readers led us to, and that was answered prayer. Because people started showing me that there was no word in our English language for answered prayer. And so they started using Godwink to fill in that vacancy. So I apologize for such a long answer.
No, it's a good answer.
It was born.
No, it's wonderful. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking about when anyone creates. I'm a writer, you're a writer, you do all this stuff. It doesn't come from us.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
I wrote a story, a novel that I'm trying to find an agent for, and it's about a slave girl. Came from Africa, came here, and I mean, I have no experience with that or anything. That was just given to me. I'm sitting in a group writing, and boom, there it is. So I think that maybe you need to have another definition here added onto it, maybe, and that is that inspiration is really also Godwink. And that's what Einstein talked about that too. And anybody who is, I call them creatives, people who think differently, think deeper, wider, whatever, and are always solution oriented, are, you know, anyway, I think maybe there's another definition of Godwinks, if I can be so bold. And that is that divine inspiration, you know, that comes when we're trying to, what you just said about when you got the name, that was it.
Yes, yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think it is an experience that, you know, it is a communication.
Yes.
That it comes from God. And as we've gone along, we've learned how to define Godwinks, but also how to recognize Godwinks. And usually a Godwink is accompanied by that word wow. If you say wow, there was a Godwink.
Perfect.
Yeah. And if you couldn't really, if you think that the odds are not to be computed, because it couldn't be computed by any reasonable scientist, that's probably a Godwink. And people always wonder, how do I get more Godwinks? First of all, they say, how do I recognize Godwinks? And one of my readers once wrote, you have to allow Godwinks, and then you start seeing them. And I thought that sums it up pretty basically. That also goes back to Godwinks are, we have a manual. The manual we have is the Judeo-Christian Bible. That's our manual. But it's not our boundaries, because we write the books, and I'm saying we, I'm talking about my wife Louise and I, we write our books so that the boundaries are anybody who believes that there is a God can believe in Godwinks. Anybody who believes in God can identify with Godwinks. Probably the only people who are excluded are atheists. And but
they probably sneak in though when you're not looking.
Oh, I know, they're kind of looking, and if they're candidates, then that's okay. But if they're starting to believe, then they probably are not really atheists. But I do think that the every idea we get is, I've always felt that it does come from that center of creativity, as you were talking about. The center of creativity.
Yeah.
You have to figure out how to tap into that.
Right. And what about this thought that they exist all the time? We may not see them. It doesn't mean that they're not there.
That's exactly right. Somebody else once said to me, God has given you the eyes to see Godwinks. And I thought, wow, he really has.
Yeah.
That is a gift. But then, hasn't he given everybody the gift to be able to see the Godwinks? They just have veils over their eyes. And so our mission should be how to teach people to lift the veils so that you can see the Godwinks. Allow the Godwinks, and then once you allow them, see them, and then acknowledge them. And it's grounded in Scripture. In Proverbs 3:6, it says, acknowledge me in all thy ways. Acknowledge God in all your ways, and then he will direct your steps. That basically is a scriptural definition of what a Godwink is.
Wow.
Acknowledge his Godwinks. Acknowledge him communicating to you, and then he will direct your steps.
Yeah. One of the ways I get communicated with, and I will send this to you, I get hearts. They can be puddles on the ground. They can be on a doormat. They can be in a piece of food. But I have this whole category of hearts that send to me because it means something to me. So I think it's the way we're accessed. And when I was younger, I used to walk in the woods and I would say, I'm not going to walk another step until I see a blue jay feather or a heart-shaped rock. They would be there.
Oh, I don't doubt it for a moment.
Yeah.
And you know what? Out of 7 billion people on the planet, Diane, you were getting a person-to-person call directly from God. How special is that?
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, I think that's part of we're in a culture right now that's really confused, but I feel so many people are so lost. We lost a lot of people last year through loneliness. Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade, Robbins. And I think that one of the things that needs to happen is people need to get connected up again. Yes. And that's what was my experience in going on the Godwinkers. So there needs to be some way that we can get this out to people, because money is not the solution. It never is. It's very nice. I enjoy it when I have it. When I don't have it, it's like, oh, that would be nice. But it doesn't make the difference. It really doesn't make the difference. And those people, I believe everything is a gift. And their leaving life was a gift to us to show us something that we were not seeing.
Yeah, I think you're right.
You're
right.
So how do we as a culture, and this is just a general question, start being more real with one another, more loving, more open, admit what's going on with us? We bury everything. Yep, we're fine. This is really good. Yep, I'm good. And that's not the story. And I mean, I don't feel we should go crying out into the street, but we need to be more real with one another. And that allows us to come from our heart. And when we come from the heart, you can do no harm.
That's true. That is true. I think we have to, first of all, be examples of what it is that we want society to look like.
Right.
And if we want people to be kind, I think we have to be kind no matter what. And but I often wonder how we can get back to some of those times when great things changed, when Wilberforce was in a place where they didn't have internet, they didn't have widespread broadcast or podcasts or the kind of communication that we have available to us. He was able to have an idea, and that was that we should get back to being more civil to each other. We needed to have civility. And Wilberforce just became an advocate for that. He just advocated it wherever he went. And he was kind when people weren't kind to him, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And that one man changed the whole society of England. The whole Victorian era came out of that time after Wilberforce. And so I find that so encouraging that that's one person who believed in God, who could march ahead and make things happen. And so I think that we can all be Wilberforces in our own way, in our own sphere. And we all have a power. We have a power that he didn't have. We could go on the internet. We can we can communicate with people in a powerful way and do things, as you say, to help other people and to seek to bring people together.
Yeah, and I think it is all of us. I mean, that's what this show is about. I'm interviewing only people who are really doing something that's making an impact. Yeah. Because we need to see it demonstrated. And one of the things I learned, it was a very interesting experience. I worked during the last campaign for someone. And what I saw during that was it's every one of us. A country is not something that's on automatic pilot. It is what you do. Yeah. And that's true of life. It is what you do. It's not something that's just going along. We think it is. And I think that's how we're all raised, but it's not that. It's whatever we create is what we're going to live. Yeah. And I think that people need to understand that. So they begin to start creating just what you said, creating things that make a difference, because we have to. We have to.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's talk about some of your books and some of your other, we're getting very deep and philosophical here. I feel like I could talk to you forever, but let's talk about some of your books and how you came to write them. What are your favorite ones? Are they different ones in different years that you like? What's going on with your books? Tell us.
Let me take my sweater jacket off.
Getting warm there. By the way, I'm a Yankee. I'm from Newport, Rhode Island.
Oh, is that right? Oh, that's.
Yeah, I could wave at you across at the vineyard, and I've been to the vineyard many times. It's beautiful there. I'm glad you're there.
We love it. We love it here in the winter time. Let me just give you a little. You look outside here. That's the little patio. Look, it's all.
You've got green. There's no snow. What's up with this?
Well, no, it's much too early. It's not February yet. Late January. And we won't get that much anyway. And we're here in the yellow cottage. Let's see. You can look through that. I'm on the
perfect house. It's the perfect house.
Yeah, we just love this little cottage. We had a big house that was our dream home.
Yeah.
And we're just in love with our little home here on the vineyard. Mm-hmm. And we live here year round. We travel all the time, but we're here year round, and we love it. So the book that is my favorite.
Yeah.
Is the one that happens to be sitting on my lap. It's like my children. It's the one that was and so I like them all for their own kinds of ways. It's interesting. There was one book that I felt a little, I shouldn't say ashamed of, but I found myself not promoting it. It was like the child that I didn't push forward. If someone would say, "You have a book for me to read," there was this one book which I didn't push forward.
Why?
And it actually happened to be my first book, When God Winks.
Yeah.
And the first book is always the one that's usually the bestseller in a series, and there are 11 books now. But here's what happened. When I started out, the publisher was very afraid of that God word.
Yeah.
And so the publisher would had an editor that kind of watered things down. And while I am not a writer who is writing from a Christian point of view, or even though I'm a Christian, I am a writer who is trying to write to everybody who believes in God. And if you don't believe in God, then this isn't for you. Godwinks aren't for you. Sure. You probably won't understand it. But if you do believe that there is somebody up there bigger than you, and even if you don't call him God, like an agnostic, if you believe that there's somebody up there bigger than you, then you've got a chance to have a closer relationship with the real God. Mm-hmm. And as Louise and I have come to understand, that one of the ways that you get more Godwinks is that you talk to God more. Mm-hmm. And it's just like any parent. The more you talk to your parent, if you call your mother every day or your father and you talk to him all the time, if you chat all the time, then you have a better relationship than somebody who has an estranged relationship, who doesn't talk very often. And so if you have a good relationship with your Father in heaven, then you are going to hear more from him as he hears more from you. Mm-hmm. The more you talk, the more he realizes that some things that you say are really prayers. Like, I really would love to see a heart. I'm not going to go further in this woods until I see it. Now, you probably didn't think of that as a prayer.
Right, but it was, yeah.
God did.
Yeah.
And so he winked at you and he created. How could he do that? How is it possible that he could do that? I don't know. Yeah. But he's God, so he can do anything. He is in the supernatural. Yeah. We're in the natural. We will never understand God. We are like little ants at the bottom of a redwood tree outside of San Francisco, looking up, trying to figure out what the whole forest looks like. We're this little ant down at the bottom of the tree. God is looking at the whole forest.
And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, the only way we got a shot at that, the only way we got a shot of seeing the whole forest is if we can figure out how we can get so close to him that we can start seeing through his eyes. then we'll see the whole forest.
Love that. One of the things, I mean, God shows off too. I just have to say that, because two of the hearts that I have, and I'll send pictures for you. One is a big rock like that, and there's a heart drawn in the matrix of the rock, just white outline, and it's in the rock. There's a second one just like that. So that's just showing off, is what I'm saying.
That is showing off, yeah.
And I would say it's slightly different from my point of view, and it's not correcting anything, it's just how I understand the world. And I feel, for me, and I can only speak for myself, it's not that because I have a different, for me, God is not a person, it's an energy. And it's not that because I pay more attention, then that energy pays more attention to me. It's that I am more aware of something that's there all the time. That's my point of view. And everybody has to have theirs, and it's important, you know. And when you say your point of view, it's going to touch a lot of people. When I say mine, then the rest of us will be sitting there going, yeah, I think so. So that's just, you know, and who the hell knows, in plain English, what we won't know till we cross over what's real. And that day is going to be incredible.
But you know, Diane,
What?
I think that your answer is correct too.
Okay.
That it's a whole lot of energy. That God is a whole lot of energy.
Yes.
And I don't doubt that at all. It's in my way of thinking, it is supernatural energy. If I were to draw a picture of God, I don't know what I would draw, because I don't see God as a human being. Although Jesus obviously is a human being that the Christians, and God lives within Jesus, and so therefore they have a human being that they can see. But as I talk about God, I don't necessarily see a human being.
Okay.
Right? But I suppose that what I'm doing is personifying that ball of energy, or that universe of energy.
I think we have to, in a way, because it's the only way we can understand. It's so vast.
Yes, that's right.
You know? And it's not just on this planet. We have to understand there are galaxies and galaxies and galaxies that have this energy that keeps all the spheres moving.
Yeah.
So it's way beyond what we can envision. But I think, and one of the things that you are bringing up, it is comforting, and it's important to have that personal sense of that energy.
Yes.
Because without that, I wouldn't want to think about it, actually.
Well, if he is showing off to you, that's a personal communication.
It is.
Sometimes, I will write on my Facebook page, does God have a sense of humor? And so I'll write all the reasons why they've got Godwinks that showed that God had a sense of humor. Yeah. And so I think he does. I think that any father that we have ever known in the earthly existence, the ideal father is one that kids with you when you're a child, who kind of, plays, hide and seek. And so why wouldn't our Heavenly Father have the same attributes?
And then here's the interesting thing, and we'll have this discussion when we cross over. We'll have that discussion on the other side. But how much of this are we making up? And then the God energy makes it conform to what we think? And how much of it is how it is? Is there any such thing as an empirical how it is? So that will be an interesting question.
I know. Well, the argument from the atheist, from the scientist point of view, is there is no evidence for a God, and therefore they dismiss that. They say God could not possibly exist, and therefore we dismiss that. Yeah. Well, of course, from our point of view, there is no evidence that there is no God.
Correct.
There is no evidence as to how the universe began. Yeah. No evidence.
And
but we have more evidence than they have.
Absolutely. Stephen Hawking's and Rupert Sheldrake, and I can't remember who else was with them. They did this whole talk, and what they came to, and these are like the premier people, thinking scientists in our world. And what they came to, when you follow everything to its logical extent, there's nothing left but God. And that's what they came to. Isn't that cool?
That is cool.
Yeah.
There can't be anything but God. And Francis, whoops, I just lost his last name. He is the head of the National Health Institute, but the great doctor, Francis, I've just forgotten it. But anyway, he was an atheist, as all scientists were atheists. They were just kind of born that way, and they kind of were brought up that way, and so on and so forth. And it was the simple question of a grandmother who said to him when he was in his 20s, she said, would a scientist come to a conclusion without first looking at the evidence?
Love it.
And he said, well, of course not. She said, well, then have you looked at the evidence for God? And he said, well, there is none. She said, oh, yes, there is. You got to go find it. And so he went to disprove her, and he became a very strong Christian. And so he is very, very proud to be able to say that he is a scientist who believes in all of the scientific principles. He is the one who mapped the DNA in our bodies, and he is a strong Christian, and so a believer in God anyway. He believes in God and he believes in science, and it was very simple.
Yeah.
God created scientists. And therefore, God created science. And therefore, if you are all of this, you can be consistent with God.
I mean, I think it would be absolutely impossible to prove or disprove. You either get it in your gut or you don't.
That's exactly
right.
right.
I think that's how it is. And I think there are different times in our life when we're close to that and times when we're not. And then I think that's the one of the many benefits of getting older, that you have to come to those conclusions one way or another. You have to nail it down.
Yes.
There is or is there ain't, my baby. It's like, and I think that's an important thing. So, but we keep going. I mean, I could talk to you forever. So what else do you have coming down the pipeline that we should know about? I mean, are there things we should be watching for? Are there things we should know about?
Yes. Do we have time for me to tell a story?
We have like another half hour almost. Okay. So go for it.
And then we'll have some room for the things that are coming down the pipe.
Okay.
You asked me in the beginning what was my favorite book. What is my favorite Godwink story? And again, there are so many Godwink stories and 11 books and all of the other research that I've got them. It's hard to narrow down. But one of my favorite all-time stories was told to us when Louise and I went to McAllen, Texas to do a talk. We were invited there by a Catholic church, and pretty much on the Mexican border, the main religion is Catholic. And if you don't know where McAllen is, if you think of the picture of Texas and then that long tail that comes down, right at the bottom of that tail, the very bottom, that's McAllen.
Okay.
Right on the Mexican border. It's a cold day in winter is 70 degrees, and so McAllen is where we were, and we had a wonderful time. We gave a talk about Godwinks and comedy. We kind of mix her comedy figures and my Godwink stories, and we mix them all together. And we love to do those kinds of talks. And then the next day, we were going to the Catholic church, and we were participating in the Sunday morning service, and then we were doing another performance that afternoon. And so after the first performance on Saturday evening, a young couple came up to us, not so young, they were in the 50s, something like that. They came up to us and they said, we have a Godwink. Well, it turned out that David Espinosa had been given a death sentence, basically, that he had a heart condition confirmed by 3 doctors locally and then other doctors at the DeBakey Health Institute up in Houston, that he had he had a heart that was only operating at 10% of capacity.
Wow.
And so if he didn't get a heart transplant, he was going to die. The clock was ticking.
Wow.
And they needed to try to get a transplant right away. They went up to the DeBakey Health Institute. They put him on the list. And they said, I'm sorry, but it usually takes about a year for a heart transplant to evolve. And then you got another problem. We usually have to put it in 3 hours. You live 5 hours away in McAllen. We'll have to deal with that when we get to it. But you better start praying, and you better start hoping that we can get a heart transplant. So they went back to McAllen. Now, Toni, T-O-N-I, who is the wife of David, a good Catholic girl, believing in God, believing that through Christ all things are possible. And she said, we are going to pray. Everybody's going to pray. We're going to pray that you can get a heart. You don't have to wait a year to get that heart. And so they started praying in the church and the family and everywhere. And after about 2 or 3 weeks, Toni was getting convicted. She was saying, wait a minute. We are praying for somebody to die in order for my husband to live. That just doesn't seem right. And so she had these private conversations with God and said, God, I don't feel good about that. Can you just heal my husband? I would pray now, God, that you would just heal my husband. I'm going to pray that from now on. I don't want somebody to have to die. And so she kept praying and praying and praying and praying, and everybody else was praying. It was the early part of December, and they were starting to feel that maybe something was happening in their lives. They got to, but about that time, it was around Thanksgiving, I guess that year, that Toni confided with her sister and with a dear friend who had been a dear friend all the way back to kindergarten with her and David in school, okay? His name was Crawford. And Crawford, she told him what she'd been praying for. She said, I've been praying for David to be completely healed, but I'd like to have God confirm it by making it snow here in McAllen on Christmas Day. He said, Toni, you've lived here all your life. Have you ever seen snow? No. You know why? It hasn't snowed in McAllen in 109 years. We had some flurries 109 years ago. And we've never had it snow on Christmas. God's going to heal my husband, and he's going to confirm it with snow.
Wow. So
she stuck by her faith, and on Christmas Eve at 11:45 p.m., one of her daughters went to turn out the light in the yard, and she looked out the window and she said, Mom, come here, look. And out in the yard, it was covered with snow. All the rose bushes were covered with snow.
Oh.
And Toni went running into the backyard. We actually have a picture of this, of her looking up. Her hair, her black hair is all speckled with white snow. It's all over her sweater. And the roses were covered with snow. And she said, thank you, God, thank you. She knew that was her confirmation. And the next morning, kids got up on Christmas Day and they went out and they started fanning snow angels in the snow and snowmen. And the newspaper did a special edition, first white Christmas in the history of McAllen, Texas.
Wow.
And 3 weeks later, they went back up to their regularly scheduled appointment at the DeBakey Institute in Houston. And the doctors did the regular test, and they came out and they said, you are David Espinoza. Yes. Well, David, I don't know what happened. But you're going to be living for a very, very long time.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow.
His heart condition had gone from an EF fractions, which meant that he was in the 50% range, which meant that he was going to die, down to about 10%, which meant that he was just fine.
Wow.
And so David Espinoza is today very healthy in McAllen, Texas. Now, that is an amazing answer to prayer.
Yeah.
And when you pray, Godwinks happen.
Wow. That, remember you said that's what it means when you it's a Godwink, you have to say, wow. I mean, not only, and this is funny, that story, not only is it a wow, I am so happy. I'm so happy for them. I mean, like, wow. I love it. I love it.
And I remember when they told us that story, they actually told us over dinner, and the bishop was having dinner with us.
Yeah.
And he said, how come you never told me this story? You were the reason that it snowed?
Oh, God. What a great story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so glad that people who are going to be watching the show and listening to the show will be able to hear that too. I want as many people as possible. So thank you for that. Okay, so what have you got on tap? What's happening? What's coming down the pike?
Well, we just had the most remarkable Christmas season. And because A Godwink Christmas, our first movie on Hallmark Channel.
Which was wonderful, by the way, yes.
Thank you very much. It was the #1 movie of the year on the Hallmark Mysteries and Movies channel when it aired.
Wow.
And it might have become #2 in terms of initial airings, first airings. But the wonderful thing about Hallmark Channel is that it's unlike the broadcast networks. We would have put that movie on the air, and then maybe they'd rerun it a year from now, maybe they wouldn't, and so forth. But at Hallmark Channel, that movie goes on the air, and then they run it about 24 times between that air date in mid-November and January 1st, or New Year's Eve was the last time that it aired. I believe when it's all tabulated, because that movie was the most frequently watched over and over of all the Hallmark movies, we believe, this year.
Oh.
And we think that it will turn out to be the #1 most watched Hallmark movies and mysteries movie in 2018.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it also lets you know how important, how people are hungry, really hungry for this.
Very hungry.
Like we need this, you know, and so the things.
What that means is that there's going to be a Godwink movie series, and so we're already working on the next one and the third one, and so that's going to take place. We are also working with an offshoot of Hallmark, which is a Dayspring, which is it is no small company. It's like a $70 million company called Dayspring. It's a greeting card company in the spiritual world, and but it doesn't have great visibility outside the Christian world. And so we are talking to them about coming together with Godwinks, that Godwinks could be the bridge to give them access into a broader secular market, because I do the monthly segments on NBC Today and the Hallmark movies, and that Godwinks is becoming word in the secular language, in the secular world. So Dayspring could benefit from that. We could benefit from the partnership with Dayspring. They have an infrastructure. And so that is all going to be very, very exciting in 2019.
Wow, that is super, because $70 million is weird. And because I work with entrepreneurs and investors, it's not a big company. That's a terrible statement to be able to make.
I know.
But you will put them on the map, and that's so great. I love that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you want to say anything? You were talking about Zoom. Is that something that's coming down the pike later, or can we talk about that another time?
No, we can talk about it right now. I have always loved the network marketing companies, but network marketing always has a bad rap. And but one of the things that Louise and I have found is that when we get a speech an invitation to go to an Amway convention or a design jewelry convention or a Mary Kay or whatever,
Sure.
those audiences are so hungry for Godwinks. And so we have always felt that there is a compatibility with Godwinks and the network marketing, multi-level marketing companies.
Sure.
But I am not a very good businessman when it comes to the Forbes model or whatever kind of a business model you have, because I believe that our first mission is to serve God in everything that we do. And that I've always felt that that if we do a good job, then the profits will follow that. When I got to Dayspring and met the president, a guy named James Barnett, he showed me the company's mission statement. It's carved in the side of the wall.
Wow,
stone.
they mean it. They mean
It's in stone. Mission number 1, serve God in everything you do.
Wow.
Mission number 2, use your God-given talents to manage the money that you have got in front of you and the profitability to serve mission number 1.
Wow.
So as long as you're using mission number 2 to serve mission number 1, we were just so thrilled with that. We felt we are among kindred spirits. So the idea of direct sales of Godwink product, coming out of online Zoom meetings,
Right.
is storytelling parties where we can have gatherings, Godwink gatherings on the internet.
I love that.
With
Bingo.
20 people. You start with 20 people.
Bingo.
And before you know it, you could have 200 people. I don't know what the dimensions where you would end, but you would have a host, a host producer, and the host producer would have maybe 3 or 4 or 5 people who would be queued up to tell their Godwink stories. And what is their mission? To bring hope and encouragement to everybody who is watching. That's the mission.
Yep.
There is no mission to buy product. There is a mission to bring hope and encouragement to everybody. Now, if we have a new book, a new Godwink book, where is it? Here's my new book right here. If we have a new book, we'll say, and there's the Godwink Christmas book, and you know what? We are selling this right now over here. Maybe for 8 minutes out of the hour, you'll go back and forth, and where you'll just mention that there is a new Godwink inspirational product. It'll be in the right-hand rail of the screen. If you want to buy it, buy it. If you don't. But you're there to be encouraged. If you think that those coffee mugs that say, had a Godwink today, is going to be good for you or encourage you to encourage somebody else, then you'll buy it and send it to them. But that is basically what we're talking about. So it's kind of like Tupperware parties meeting Godwinks.
Without all the plastic.
Yes, without plastic. And you're not there to talk about Tupperware, and we're not there to talk about Godwink product. We're there to talk about Godwinks, and product is just item number 2 over here. Mission number 1 is to bring hope and encouragement to everybody. And so that's what we're talking about with using Zoom as a vehicle of technology so that people can participate in these hopeful sessions without ever leaving their porch. I can be right here in the porch, and you can be there in your living room or wherever else, and so I think that's going to be a big step forward in 2019.
I love that. That's really important. And it also, one of the things that for me, and I guess I have an agenda, but for people to stop saying what they believe and live what they believe. And I think that's what the Godwinks is about. It is God in motion, if you will, in our lives and in our hearts. And it's not just words that are used to control or to make people do things or feel a certain way. So do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it's a really critical thing that you're doing. It's and I'm the beneficiary of it. So anybody who wants to know, just call me. I will tell you about it. I will tell you how it was. And I will never forget what those people said to me. And they were there all the time.
The Godwinkers, yeah.
Ah. And I put a woman that I know that works at the Goodwill, her sister and her brother-in-law were ill. I put them up on the Godwinks. There were 75 people praying for them.
Wow.
So I'm going to make sure she knows
great.
about that.
This is great. Now, let me ask you something. This is something that came out of our morning prayer time.
Okay.
We pray together.
We've got 3 minutes, honey. We've got 3 minutes.
We pray together every single day at 7:15 a.m. And we pray about the things that are on our heart, and we pray about people that we need to pray for. And it's during that time that God often communicates to us with a great idea. And this morning, God put it into my mind that we should do another page in a Facebook private group that will serve a community that I have been saving stories to write about for 10 years.
Wow.
But I've never had a publisher that really wanted to do the book. And so, and as every time I get to the point where I say, we got to do that book, it was a book on Godwinks on recovery.
That would be fabulous.
And so what we're talking about doing, the idea was to do Godwinks on recovery as a Facebook private group. We met at lunch just before we saw you with 2 people who can help us facilitate that and just work on it, give it the manpower to work on it, and that we can bring hope and encouragement to people who are struggling in recovery.
Yeah.
So while the Godwinkers is really people who are dealing with all kinds of other issues, and it's more of a prayer-based site, this is going to be tell your Godwink story, like the Godwink story you tell at AA.
I love that.
Be encouraged and encourage others.
I love that. We're going to wrap up. I hate doing this. Can you stick around a minute afterwards, or do you need to go? If you need to go, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So I can't tell you enough that how wonderful this has been. And all my listeners are so lucky to hear you, see you, know about you, and all of those things. So you can find all of SQuire Rushnell's book at any bookstore, online bookstore. Watch Hallmark movies. You'll be there sooner or later, and for many, many times. So, and then we're going to kind of look at, are any of the Facebook pages open or not?
Any of the what?
Facebook pages, are they open to the public or not?
Yeah. Well, the private group is you need to. It's a private group, but you need to be you need to be registered in. But the Godwink Facebook.com/Godwinks is 277,000.
Perfect.
And so anybody can go there. Yeah.
That's where we want to send people. So thank you so much, SQuire. This has been absolutely amazing. I knew it was going to be good. I never knew it was going to be this good. I'm so pleased. So this is your host for Transformations, Diane Jane Shaver, thanking you for being with us. So until next time, this is Diane J. Shaver saying goodbye for Hope Transformation. By working together, we can change the world, and you can be a part of that. Thank you.